If I look good, I know I look good, y'all. I have got, just to let you know, as we get started, going back to the Old Forester 1920 to get us a little bit lubricated this evening. Y'all, what's up? Weird night for college football, and I am, as I said earlier, running a solo mission. It's going to be a struggle, y'all, a little bit. I'm not used to going solo. When Josh talks, I can kind of sit back, gather my thoughts, but I am going 100 miles an hour tonight. So, all right, y'all, let me know. Let me know what it's sounding like in the comments. Arkansas is struggling. Josh pointed this out earlier today. We both pointed out last week. I think we put them in our top 10 reluctantly. We had some concerns coming out of the Cincinnati game, and just in general, it didn't look like good football to us. And we got kind of killed for it. But honestly, I thought that I'm kind of surprised that this is what we're getting tonight with Missouri State. But we had our concerns really offensively, but looks like defensively too tonight. 10-3, Texas A&M, Miami. This game has gone a little bit about like what we expected. We picked Miami in this game. Miami, if they would not, without some mistakes, without the muff punt, which seems to be a huge deal in SEC games this year, one way or the other, without the muff punt, and without, I think there's a big drop on their last drive before they missed the field goal that would have maybe been a touchdown. Miami would be winning this game. And right now, it just seems like they need to kind of calm down a little bit and take over. Obviously, the big story was multiple suspensions for Mississippi State, or not Mississippi State, for Texas A&M, and they're still looking okay, but some big weapons there for Max Johnson to not have to throw to. Just still getting set up a little bit, y'all, so bear with me. All right, so make sure I'm on mute. SEC is looking rough so far, y'all. Kentucky, I don't know that Kentucky is legit. Florida's struggling right now with South Florida. And I think that we need to be careful with Kentucky because it's this clean win-loss record thing that imparts a little bias in all of us. But if you really think about that Kentucky-Florida game last week and what we got out of it, Anthony Richardson was a liability in that game and gave them either 10 or 14 points with the two interceptions. One was a pick six, was a direct touchdown, and then the other one, they got the ball down like the 3 or 4 yard line, I think. And I think Florida's pretty good defensively, so I'm not super concerned with offensive struggles, but I don't know that Kentucky is legit in terms of like real contender for a top 10 team. They might end up there with a clean record because y'all, SEC is East is a struggle bus. I think LSU is a better team than they're getting credit for, but there was a couple of sequences tonight that really kind of turned that game in their favor. I tweeted about it just before I got on. I think 5 of the last 6 possessions for Mississippi State starting the second half were 3 and outs. And then they had the muff punt, which just absolutely gassed that defense. There's a little bit of a fool's gold in that score for LSU because I think they benefited a little bit from an absolutely exhausted Mississippi State defense. Another game to touch on that's a little bit of a head scratcher, but maybe much if we followed Clemson for the last year, especially, and now year and a half. 13-6 over Louisiana Tech in the third quarter. DJU, if you just look at his stats, right? Like if you just look at the box score, well, it's not great now. What he was at about 8.5 yards per attempt, but now he's thrown it 22 times, y'all, for only 144 yards against the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs. That's not great. What's weird is Clemson's running for 6 yards a touch. Still only got 13 points on the board. That's really strange, y'all. It's really strange. And Louisiana Tech's keeping the ball enough in spite of this great, defense. They're keeping the ball enough to not let Clemson really get any consistency offensively. I'm going to get lost a little bit in these comments, but I'm gonna try to pick out questions as you go. Stephen Light comes in as usual. Penn State alert. There is a running game. I will say, I, I, I think Penn State fans should be excited about today. They deserve to be excited for a win on the road in the SEC against a crowd that was super hype. There was a lot of fanfare coming into that game, but y'all, Auburn ain't it. And kind of like we saw with Mississippi State, that defense was just they just kind of at the end gave in because of that just horrendous offensive performance uh from the Auburn quarterbacks. And we said this coming into the season. I highlighted another tweet of mine, and I don't think this was some big revelation that I had in August, but word out of camp for Auburn was that TJ Finley was the starter. He was getting all the starting reps. Calzada transferred there after having the big game, not the big year last year, but the big game against Alabama. He transferred in. A lot of people thought he might take the reins there. Ashford is there as well. And I tweeted, I said, y'all, look, if Finley is the guy coming out of camp, my goodness, Auburn's got some problems because Finley was not that dude last year. He was objectively bad. And Holy Sal says, "Does Harsin make it the whole season?" Auburn's in a little bit of a tough spot because of, they've got their last 7 coaches or whatever still on the payroll. But I think you got to do something because one of the problems for Auburn is recruiting momentum is going in the absolute wrong direction. My goodness, Miami can't kick a field goal to save their lives. They've wasted a lot of yards and a lot of possessions in this game. They're going to have to get in the end zone if they're going to win this game because they can't kick a field goal. But yeah, Auburn's recruiting momentum is in such a place that they've got to make a change. And the problem is Harsin has a couple of issues. One, he doesn't have that cachet to come in and win recruiting battles. But 2, he's not a system guy. So you can win. Like Gus was a system guy at Auburn. So he came in, brought a system to the stage and was able to neutralize talent gaps and talent disadvantage that he had and won with a system. So, if Auburn would have gone out and hired in this case, a hot shot offensive coordinator or something, then they would have been in a much better place because they could win some games with the system. Harsin is none of that. I think he's a solid coach, but you can't just be an all-around good coach and win at Auburn when you've got Kirby Smart in the East and Nick Saban in the West. Not to mention Auburn plays teams out of conference. They like we see Penn State today. They got LSU out there, the Arkansas of the world. So Gus recruited okay, Mooner, but the momentum was going in the wrong direction. And so that was a bit of a concern. And his offensive line recruiting was an absolute disaster. So Stephen Light, who does bring it every week. Look at Kevin Briggins giving me a shout out in the comments. Thank you for letting me know that I sound good. But yeah, on the flip side, Penn State did show up. There's nothing I saw from Penn State today that gives me a lot of concern. They were a little bit of a struggle bus offensive early, but they handled their business. We picked Penn State to win this game. I don't think anybody saw coming what we saw today. Somebody's asking about Florida's run defense. It's weird because Florida's run defense has actually been really good. It was good against Kentucky. They were swarming against Kentucky. Utah ran for some yards against Florida, but it was mostly like some design runs, but a lot of break containment quarterback yards, not a lot, from the running back. But South Florida is keeping the pressure on Florida in this game. And what we're seeing this year, which I think is kind of interesting, kind of maybe exciting, is we've been asking for parity for a long time, but what we're seeing this year is like G5 to P5 parity, which means P5 across conferences, across teams within the same divisions. There's going to be even more parity, which is really exciting. Although Georgia's out there and it's not going to matter, y'all. Look, I think that we gave South Carolina a little too much credit in our preview, but Josh has been hammering this all week, and he did pick Georgia to cover by more than a touchdown, I think. So he picked a blowout. I think I picked Georgia to win by like 21. Um, South Carolina is a bad team, and this is why I think that we need to. There's a couple of teams we need to pause the brakes on. I don't think Georgia's elite. They are. They're a really good football team, but kind of like Michigan. So Michigan won again today. They blew out, I think, UConn. They blew out Hawaii last week. But I keep reminding people the best team that Michigan plays out of conference. So they play all three of their out of conference games to start the season. Was 3-9 Colorado State from last year. We got to remember when we're thinking about Michigan, who I think is very good, and I think they found something with JJ. By the way, Michigan had 7 players attempt a pass today. 7 attempt at least one pass. K. McNamara only attempted one pass, which is interesting. But Michigan, they beat a team last week in Hawaii. They didn't beat him as bad as Vanderbilt did. And that's not saying anything other than, guys, like, we don't know anything about Michigan and their rebuild of the pieces they lost until we see them play somebody with a pulse. And unfortunately, it's not going to be for a month. Florida is about to give up the lead over South Florida. This is wild. This is also indicative of what we've been saying for a while. Anthony Richardson is not the kind of guy that has command enough of this offense that he's going to go out and like he's going to put up 20 something points on Utah. He's going to put up 20 something points on South Florida. Like that's just who he is. He's not an elite. He's not a quarterback who can run any offensive system yet at an elite level because the passing accuracy isn't there, and he's still a one-read guy. I did see another super chat, and I'm going to catch it because I think it was a little snarky, and that's okay. I can own it. Larry, who also shows up. Penn State and A&M folks show up every week. But Larry said, maybe you guys will respect Penn State more. You've said our roster was lackluster. Picks us to come out with a close win. We did pick a close win, but a lot of that was just on we didn't know what we didn't know about Auburn. Like we assumed they weren't great. We thought this crowd might have a little more impact. I just like last year when Penn State beat Auburn and Penn State fans were telling us, we just beat an SEC team. Big deal. It's a big deal. We told y'all to pump the brakes that Auburn sucked. And y'all told us we were crazy. So until Penn State beats a good team soundly, I don't think it's time for I told you so's yet. I was impressed. Penn State, I think, has found something at running back. Penn State does have good tight ends. But I got an argument with somebody this week who told me that I didn't know the Big Ten because I wasn't willing to concede that Georgia or Penn State have better tight ends that Notre Dame or Penn State have better tight ends than Georgia, which I thought was ridiculous. But no, Penn State looked good, but I think we've seen enough of Sean Clifford to know that he's not a great quarterback. Man, A&M is running all over Miami, which is crazy because, what you need to do with A&M is force them to throw because Max Johnson is not great. But their offensive line's getting a lot of wins, a lot of really good run fits for a guy who's not great in between the tackles, but A-Chain is an explosive player. LSU's defense looked great tonight, y'all. I was really impressed. Although I was also a little bothered by the fact that Mississippi State couldn't catch a cold. I mean, when they needed to put a drive together, they just couldn't catch it. Steven saying surprised that Michigan State is getting killed by Washington. Josh was on a podcast. He did a guest spot on a podcast earlier this week, and he picked Washington to beat Michigan State outright, which was interesting. And then the rankings disparity, I think Michigan was was a road dog in this game, which tells you a lot about what people actually think about teams versus how they rank them. Um, King Laws asked, "How do I feel about Arkansas?" I opened with that. We aren't super high on Arkansas this year. Clemson did manage to score again. It's 20-6. Ugly game all around, though. I'll get into it a little bit later, but Alabama also had an ugly game. I know they won like 63-7 or whatever. They had three non-offensive touchdowns and 260 something, I think 263 yards of punt return. Um, Bryce Young didn't look great. Offensive line protected him well. Running backs showed up. Bryce Young didn't look great, and wide receivers didn't look great. So some of it was Alabama working on some stuff. Um, they they were running RPO slants, which they haven't run all year. They're running some interesting stuff in the running game. So I do think that some of it was that they were working on stuff, but Bryce Young's still missing people in the deep ball, and I think that's probably timing or whatever. But I can see that Burton was probably still he might get frustrated because he's transferred now to another school that's not getting him the ball. Maybe he's just not that good. I think this year's UGA defense will give up less points than last year's. I don't know if they will be better, but I'm excited. Go Dogs. Thank you, Josh, for the super chat. Yeah, I mean, Georgia's defense is elite. They're elite every year. I think they're in that Alabama territory where we've seen for years and years, Alabama loses guys to the draft, and people expect them to suck because they lost all this stuff. Well, about 5 years of them not sucking, people figured it out. Georgia is there too from a development standpoint. I will also say they benefit from what this year is going to be just a, honestly a weak schedule. They have a little bit of a tough stretch at the end, but tough is relative. They're not going to get tested until they play Alabama in the SEC championship game. And I don't know that Alabama is elite this year. But I don't know that anybody's elite compared to Georgia. The thing I'll say is it's going to be hard to know about Georgia because there's really, I mean, who's the best offense they're going to play? Tennessee. But they'll be able to score 106 points on Tennessee if they want. So, Ohio State gave up some points early to Toledo tonight. Talk to me about that a little bit in the chat because I didn't get to see much of that game. Jack McGinnis said offense wasn't great, but Tyler Harrell is coming back. Alabama has a couple of wide receivers that have been hurt, and I do think that Earl came back. I've never been high on Earl for the record, but I do think Tyler Harrell coming back could have a significant impact. We said in the offseason we expected Harrell to be the guy, not Burton, to be the guy, maybe the featured guy in this offense. I'm really high on him in this offense. We'll see. Alabama's offensive line is better this year. So if they can figure it out at wide receiver, then they will be legit. And they've really got something I think thrown to the running back Gibbs is really good. There's a comment about Gaddis I see, and this is one of the reasons why I wasn't super excited about picking Miami. Neither Josh or myself are high on Gaddis. Just don't think he's great. And we think that Michigan was kind of happy to see him leave, and not sure if he's going to be a great fit long term for Miami in the immediate against a really good Texas A&M team. I don't know that he's going to be able to scheme up a whole lot. Thoughts on Oklahoma, Jack? It's a good question because I tweeted this morning because there's a lot of commentary. There's a lot of commentary coming out of the Frost firing, some excitement, some renewed excitement for this Nebraska team. I saw a lot of people picking Nebraska outright this week, and I just did not get it. And so I wanted a sanity check, so I tweeted about it because I wanted y'all to talk to me about it. And I said, like, look, this is the same team that lost to a bad Northwestern team, that lost to a bad Georgia Southern team. I think Georgia Southern y'all let me know, who did they get beat by today? What isn't a good team? So at the end of the day, if you're bad enough to lose to these teams, you can have all the excitement in the world and be hype or whatever, but that's going to last you about a drive or two, and then you're going to be playing a good football team. Oklahoma's a good football team. I don't think they're a great football team, I like Gabriel a good bit. I don't love him, but I don't know that you have to be a great football team to win the Big 12 this year, especially seeing what Texas is struggling with tonight with Texas State. Um, so, so we'll see. But I'm pretty high on Oklahoma, and I'm glad to see them play defense again. Obviously, Oklahoma fans have had to suffer for a while under, a couple of regimes that didn't really want to play defense. So I'm glad to see that. Michigan State looking like a mess against Washington. Somebody pointed out in the comments. Florida's offense looking like a mess. Just got a big kind of jump ball from Richardson, shorter, but in general, man, they're a struggle bus. Let's see. So Texas did take the lead on UTSA, and y'all, I want to back up a little bit because last week after the Alabama game, one of the things I said was I'm not super high on Texas this year. I think they're going to be good next year. I'm not super high on Texas, and one of the things for me was as much as Alabama floundered for 2.5 quarters against Texas last week, if they were playing Georgia or Ohio State or even just a good, in my opinion, like a really good team, they'd kill them, right? So that gave me a lot of concern. The fact they hung with Alabama is something, but a lot of Alabama's problems are self-imposed. Um, but I will say that struggling with UTSA when you've got a backup quarterback in who's this is the first week that he's got all the reps, he's still hurt. Struggling with UTSA isn't that bad. UTSA, for y'all who don't know, like they put out some good teams lately. They almost beat Houston to open the season. Houston's not elite or anything, not great, but that's a decent team with not a great name, not a lot of pedigree, but that's a good team. Um, no, Anthony Richardson cannot throw the ball. Alabama's issue is an OC who refuses to adjust to what his team does best. I would agree with this. I went on a whole rant last week about it in our live show, and one thing we didn't see today was the late checks, late motion stuff. So maybe that's fixed. I think Alabama knows that they can run tempo and put points on the board. So maybe today we saw them kind of working on things, but they can keep tempo in their back pocket for when they play Arkansas. Um, but but yeah, I think that Alabama is tremendously talented with a mediocre offensive coordinator. Alabama doesn't have a lot of identity on offense, and when you watch them play, it feels like the really good offenses from the aughts, like 2007, 2008 kind of teams, maybe late '90s kind of teams, where they can out talent you and score a lot of points, but in general, like they're also gonna have a lot of you can stop them, you can slow them down, and we haven't seen that from elite teams in the last 7, 8 years, maybe more, where those elite teams had offenses that could put up 40 points on good defenses, and I just don't see that with Alabama right now. Now, we didn't see that last year until the end of the season either. Um, all right, so Florida is bad. I don't think Florida's great. I think that they're actually more talented than maybe we think because the talent the talent wasn't terrible. Mullen just misused a lot of it. Now they, like a lot of teams, are a quarterback away. I think LSU's a quarterback away. Jaden Daniels is good. He's not great. He can run and find a little bit. He's not great. Do I have any thoughts on 3-0 Kansas? I love it. I mean, I think it's great, but I'm also skeptical that it says more great about Kansas than it does about their opponents. Um, Florida probably not about to lose to South Florida, but maybe given the fact that defense has been struggling. Um, um, Arkansas plays A&M next week, so maybe they were looking ahead. Oh my goodness, interception right after I said that. Maybe they are about to lose to South Florida. Um, y'all, who's the good teams after Alabama and Georgia this year? Is this the first year where that meme is actually true? For a decade, people have said the SEC is just top heavy. It's just one or two teams and everybody else. Meanwhile, the mid-pack SEC is beating division winners from other conferences in bowl games or out of conference. Now, this year, I think that you might have a case for that. I think that LSU might be the 3rd best team in the SEC, and they've already lost to Florida State. Um, Florida, man, this is incredible. This is Florida doesn't have a quarterback, and I'm a little worried that there's pressure to start Anthony Richardson because he's so just if he was at a combine, he'd show out talent-wise, and there's pressure because the fans just love he was, like, on draft boards and Heisman watch lists, and I hope that Napier doesn't succumb to that pressure if he sees that Anthony Richardson is kinda holding him back, because I do think that he might be holding back, and he lost in the game last week against Kentucky. I think Florida beats Kentucky last week if if they had just subpar quarterback play. Um, let's see. No, Alabama is not that good. They struggled against Texas without their starting QB. I mean, Alabama almost lost to Auburn last year and beat the absolute brakes off of Georgia in the SEC championship game. So, I I think we need to pause a little bit on Alabama being not that good versus Alabama figuring stuff out. Now, does that mean that they're as good as Georgia? I don't think so, but not that good compared to what? Because Alabama would absolutely beat Michigan tomorrow. They would. That's a bad matchup for Michigan. Alabama probably puts up 50 on USC if they need to beat them tomorrow. So, I don't know about not that good. Alright, let's see. Let's hit this chat a little bit harder. Um, Michigan needs to actually play someone. We talked about that earlier in the game in the show here that, yeah, Michigan's opening the season with 3 absolute garbage teams. The teams that, you know, have been and would be blown out by Vanderbilt. Um, so yeah, that's I would love for Michigan to play somebody so we can get a good gauge on who they are, but man, it feels like the entire country is just kind of leveled out, and there's not there's more parity than there's ever been. Um, so let's see. What else we got? Georgia's better now. Wait till December. I mean, I think that Georgia is tough to know because one of the things I'm a little concerned with if I'm a Georgia fan being tested. You can play if you finally play a really good team, it can be a shock, and you can be down 17-3 before you know it, and that's a hard hole to dig out of, so that's a little bit concerning. Um, let's see. We're gonna have a little bit of downtime in these, more than normal because I'm running solo and I'm trying to go through the chat to let y'all drive the discussion a little bit. UCLA, lost to South Alabama today. That was pretty wild. I was following that game a little bit. It's crazy to me how many brand names in college football, P5 brand names, are struggling with or losing to okay G5s. Like App State, we saw today on that crazy Hail Mary, they almost lost to Troy. They're good. They're not that good, right? So A&M's got no excuse losing to them, but it's happening all across college football. So that's a little bit Mike Farina, how's it going tonight? Man, OSU gets their wide receivers back, and the offense has just exploded. Yeah, and one of the guys we flagged this summer, Marvin Harrison Jr., I think was at least at half, was showing out more than any of them. So we're excited to see him come up because I think that he might be the best route runner in college football, which says a lot, like, because especially on that team, with those wide receivers, he may not be like if that whole wide receiver room was getting drafted tomorrow, he may not be the top guy. It's probably gonna be JSN. But Uh, I I kinda like him a little bit more. I hate to say that 'cause, uh, he got at me for it. Michigan ain't beating Ohio State. Look, w maybe not, but we said this all last year too, right? Like, I don't know, neither one of these teams have played a good team. So that's something that we need to remember. We want to have opinions about a lot of things that aren't supported by data yet, and so I don't know that we can definitively say that Michigan ain't beating Ohio State, right? Like, Ohio State did give up 14 early points to Toledo today. Um, what are my thoughts on Oregon now? I don't know because I wasn't super high on BYU. Um, I know that, like, look, Georgia is number 1. Georgia, I can think Georgia is an elite team and still think Oregon kind of sucks. If you go back and watch the film of that Georgia-Oregon game, there were plays where literally, if and you can't see the whole field because of the way that the broadcast is, but there are plays where, like, you've got a slot receiver, one of Georgia's 7 tight ends, and, like, your Z receiver, and there's nobody within 10 yards of any of that. That is not good. They never made Stetson Bennett uncomfortable, have to do anything really interesting. Um, let's see. Marshall lost in Bowling Green today. This is another thing, like, I was critical of the top 25, maybe top 25 this week. I even posted a tweet about it, where, App State's not ranked and Marshall's not ranked, and those teams struggled today against a bad team, uh, multiple bad teams. So, yes, in hindsight, that criticism might look like, "Ha ha," whatever, but there's a lot of people not going with the data that we have, and they're making a lot of assumptions, um, and a lot of it's based on brand name, and then we see, gosh, like, look at Notre Dame today, and I hope y'all saw that clip that's going around of a little bit of foul language getting thrown at a quarterback. Um, Notre Dame was not good today. It's not a good football team. So, I don't know where we go in terms of, like, ranking. Thankfully, because I'm doing this solo, I don't have to do a top 25 or top 10 this week. We might do one tomorrow. Um, somebody said they couldn't make Oregon couldn't make Stetson Bennett uncomfortable because he's getting the ball out. He's getting the ball out to guys who a second after the snap are 10 yards open, and 3 Oregon DBs are covering 1 guy. Like, some of this we can we admit that Oregon might be bad, like, and Bo Nix might be bad? Um, I think that that's a fair thing to say, and that doesn't change my opinion that Georgia's still number 1 in my mind, but Ohio State fans do this a lot. Like, they did this, I remember when in 2019, they beat Cincinnati 42 to nothing, and they argued with us all season about how great Cincinnati was, because they won a bunch of games. Cincinnati lost 2 other games in the regular season, lost to Memphis twice, and I think they got blown out, in their bowl game against the Power 5 team. So, elite teams, I think fans need the teams they beat to be good for them to feel good about it, but just be okay with Oregon maybe sucking, but you beat them by 46 points instead of beating them by 70. Not a lot of teams can do that. Holy cow, the block came through with a massive super chat with no question. I'd love to say more than thanks, but thanks. If you got a question, please hit us up in the chat. Hit me up because I'm already doing it, by myself. Zachy said, "CFB nerds, did you already discuss Auburn's future coach?" I did for a little bit. I discussed the situation they're in, that they're gonna need a future coach because Harsin ain't it. I think they need to go to a system guy, someone who is elite on either the defensive side of the ball or the offensive side of the ball, probably offense again, um, because they're not gonna get just like a good guy, a hard-nosed guy that coaches them up, um, and beat anybody because they've already got all of those guys plus talent in the SEC everywhere else. In the block, thank you so much for the super chat. That's awesome. Um, Gerald Armstrong celebrating Auburn getting killed today. I'm guessing maybe a Georgia or Alabama fan. Um, Horatio once again, like he does every Saturday night, getting just straight trash talking everybody in the comments. At some point, he's gonna have to play nice, or we're gonna have to mute him or something. Um, okay, let's see. I'm getting some notes that my sound is not great. Let me see if I can if I can turn something off. Give me 1 second, guys. Sorry, it sounds like I'm having some issues. For y'all, let me know that my sound isn't great. Tell me, has it been bad all night, or is it just recently? All right, give me 1 second, y'all. I'm gonna try to do something on the audio. Give me 1 second. All right, let me know. Does it sound any better? Any better? Okay. So somebody said Bryce Young throws 2 interceptions against a bad team and no criticism. I actually already criticized Alabama's offense tonight. I think I said they're still uneven. I do think that um, some of it has to do with the fact that when you have a lot of non-offensive touchdowns and you have a lot of kick returns for giving you the ball on the 30-yard line, like your workload is different in how you approach the game and things that you're doing. Alabama also uses these games against bad opponents to work on stuff that they're terrible at. Um, and thank you, certified clapaholic. It's parity, Parity, not parody like haha parody. But yeah, Alabama's offense did great today. You can't glean much from these games, though, other than I do think that Bryce Young has some issues with his deep ball, at least getting timing with these wide receivers. Running game looked great, offensive line looked great, but it's against a terrible opponent. It's kind of like Georgia last week. Like they had 30 points at the half, and that was it. But I don't know what to think much more about that. Um, how long Lamar coming in after his team got a win tonight? How long do college football programs have to pretend Hugh Freeze and Bobby Petrino don't exist? Especially Hugh Freeze. Um, I think 1 point loss tonight, but Liberty. Nobody wants to play Liberty. Nobody. And Lamar, I don't know. I think that he'll get a job this next year. I think he will. I don't know. I don't think Petrino might have to fight back a little bit harder, but I do think that Hugh Freeze, it's so hard to ignore him right now and what he's doing. Um, okay, let's get into some more questions. Um, UGA beat a team that's likely in the top 15 this week. Um, maybe. I mean, Notre Dame was number 5 to open the season. I just people need Oregon to be good. I'm sorry, they're not. Um, Stroud is the Heisman front runner. Bennett ain't doing Stroud numbers. Stetson Bennett has he leads the nation in yards per attempt, and he's not had to play like anybody really yet. Um, I I don't think Stetson Bennett is a better quarterback than Stroud, like as an NFL prospect. but I'm not sure there's a quarterback in an offensive system that's more deadly. Um, the guy just runs that system like it's like a Swiss clock, y'all. It's incredible to see. So I don't know. Um, let's see. Bennett has 0 chance at Heisman again. Like he probably doesn't win the Heisman, but you know, if you swap quarterbacks or if Bennett gets hurt and Carson Beck, or whoever their backup quarterback is, um, has to has to be the guy, I don't know that Georgia's nearly as deadly as they are, which says a lot to me. Um, let's see. Bryce folds under pressure. Their offense puts too much on him, and not being able to handle pass rush adds to that. I mean, he had a pretty pressure-packed minute 49 or whatever last week that he didn't seem like he folded under pressure. Auburn last year didn't seem like he folded under pressure. Um, national championship game last year, he had pretty major drops on perfect passes. It wasn't him, I think, that lost them that game. So, no, Zach Anthony Richardson is not very good. Um, they just destroyed BYU. What are you talking about? Do we think BYU is great because they beat Baylor? Is that what we're going with? Like BYU, what do we know about BYU? What do we know about that matchup? Right? Like, come on. Did you watch the Oregon Georgia game? Um, I think BYU decent. I think that matchup might have been bad, but we'll see. We'll see how Oregon does. Maybe they don't really play anybody. But we'll see. I'm done talking about Oregon. Um, let's see. Greg said he Alabama's game tonight. Why aren't people ragging on the offense still? They put up 63. They didn't. They had 3 non-offensive touchdowns. They had a couple of touchdowns late that were just like runs up the middle after La Monroe was spent, and then they had some uneven offense for I think 3. I think they scored 3 offensive touchdowns when they were really trying, with all the starters. It was pretty uneven. It wasn't great, if I'm being honest. Jahmyr Gibbs is good. I was interested to point out, Texas was struggling to run the ball tonight. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because and I see Clemson finally scoring some points. Um, Bijan Robinson, and now he's put up some numbers. For the first half of this game, he had like 2.8 yards per carry. But now he's finally put on some numbers, so that's pretty good. Hudson Card struggling a little bit, which is not entirely unsurprising. Coming in as a backup, um, that's not a shocker. He's still not healthy, I don't think. I do think he's a decent quarterback though. Um, you feel like Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields were both better than Stroud. Dwayne Haskins was not. He wasn't a great college quarterback. He benefited from 2 things. One, an Ohio State team that really was just more talented than everybody they played, and an offense that was this whole scheme was around Yak. So if you went back and watched him play, he'd have his high yards per attempt games. He had a lot of yak where he was throwing underneath a lot of short stuff that was going. Wide receivers were just going. But he also had a lot of games. Like I know he put up like he had a game where he had like 450, 500 something yards, something maybe even more. I think it was against Purdue. And people are like, you can't blame the loss on him. But if you look at his yards per attempt, it was pretty bad. I was never high on Haskins. CJ Stroud is a lot better quarterback. He's a lot better in the red zone. He's got a lot better vision for the field, and he can throw people open. Haskins was not ever going to throw somebody open. Art Smith, props to Daniel for the solo stream tonight. Thank you so much. These are super hard. You know, Josh Pate, he does these solo, but he also has producers, people that feed him info. I'm having to do a little bit of read the comments and react. Florida is absolutely struggling against South Florida, and it's going to come down to the wire. 50 seconds left on what I've got. Up 3. This is weird. This is weird. The top 25 is a wreck. Yeah, I don't know what you do with the top 25 right now. But this is why y'all, like, we don't release a model until week 4, and our model is still going to be wonky because of all the parity this year. Like, the model has historically been good because college football up until COVID was a very chalk heavy sport. It's not now. So our model is going to be a little challenged, and ranking is challenging. Top 25 is challenging. Let's see. Washington's looking incredible against overrated Michigan State. It's tough with Michigan State too, like, because I was kind of high on them this year, but they did rely on a lot of transfers last year. Here's an interesting concept tacked onto Lamar's question. Every last word asked, would SEC allow Freeze back? I do think I heard a rumor a couple years ago that Nick Saban tried to bring Hugh Freeze in as his OC, and they wouldn't allow it. So I don't know if they would allow him back, but the guy was a cheater, like a real bad cheater. And I'm sorry if there's any Ole Miss fans in this chat, but like, I kind of think it's fair that he's in purgatory because, and sorry if I hear my dogs in the background. I think it's fair that he's in purgatory. The guy cheated like crazy, and Ole Miss is lucky that they didn't completely crater, but man, he's gonna land somewhere. Dawson, love your work. Do you rate anybody? If you think Oregon is not good, then BYU isn't either. Then Baylor isn't either. I mean, I think it's tough right now to say who is good and who isn't, other than, like, we know Georgia's good. We know they're elite. We know Ohio State's good. We know Michigan's good. We don't know what level of good they are. I think BYU is decent. I also think they have a roster issue, and I also think that they probably were completely spent after last week, and we saw that with App State today, right? Like, we saw that. I've frankly felt Baylor's been overrated for years. So, but good is relative. Like, when we're talking about good, is someone a decent football team, or are they someone that's, a top 5 team or top 10 team at the end of the year? That's tough. AJ Yoder asks, who has great wins this year so far? I think Georgia, even though I'm not high on Oregon, I think Georgia beating the absolute crap out of Oregon is a great win, because, and this is what we always say, it's not just wins and losses, it's how you perform in these games. And there's not a lot of teams in college football, there may be only one, that can beat who I think is just an okay Oregon team, maybe mediocre Oregon team, that can beat them that bad. So even if I'm not super high on Oregon, beating them that bad is a huge accomplishment. I think that's a big win. I think maybe Alabama's win, even though they performed pretty poorly on the road at Texas, is going to prove to be a decent win, not a great win. I think Texas is probably an 8-4-ish type team this year. I don't think Florida's win over Utah is going to prove to be that big a deal. I think there's going to be some Pac-12 teams that come out with pretty clean records that aren't great teams. So it's, I think App State's win over Texas A&M was exciting. I don't think Texas A&M is a great team. I think they got a great defense, but I don't think they're a great team. So there's not a lot of great wins this year. And we've got some, what I was hoping was this year wouldn't have, because if you look at the preseason, at the out-of-conference matchups, there were some good ones, right? And I was hoping that we wouldn't have a lot of data isolation, but it turns out that some of these just weren't that big a deal. And it's disappointing. I'll say this every time. It's disappointing that Michigan's not playing anybody out of conference, because that's a major player in a major conference in the every year first or second toughest division in college football, and now we have no data points, no relative data points to know how good really Ohio State or Michigan is relative to college football, the rest of college football, because Notre Dame sucks, and Michigan's best out-of-conference opponent is 3-9 from last year, Colorado State. So that's really tough. I don't know. Washington's win tonight might be one of the better wins in college football. Best division in college football right now is based on what we don't know. Right now, we're assuming that Michigan is really good, but we don't know anything really about them because they haven't played anybody. But it's still, right now, I'd probably say Big Ten East. SEC West, Auburn sucks this year. Mississippi State's okay. LSU, I think it will end up being a good, not great team because they're not good at quarterback. Really good defense, though. Super athletic, explosive defense. But I think Arkansas is a little bit overrated. So, yeah, probably Big Ten East this year. Let's see. Who else is talking to us? Y'all, these solo mission live streams are pretty tough. I'm not going to lie. Joseph with the super chat asks, is AR-15 the biggest fall of week 1 Heisman ever? Dude was a projected top 10 pick 2 weeks ago. He was, and I didn't get it. I did not get it. We pissed Florida fans off last year, and this is what we do. Like we're so used to really picking apart elite teams that we will kind of do that too on okay teams. And we told Florida fans last year to pump the brakes on him. We weren't super excited about him. I thought he would make the next step of maturation as a quarterback. He didn't really do that. At least he hasn't so far. And yeah, I did not understand the top 10 draft pick preseason hype that I saw from him. I was a little bit more optimistic, though, that he would be better than what we've seen. I thought that Napier would give him a little bit better opportunity to shine, but I think people have figured out that if you keep him from running, you're not going to lose to him because he can't throw. He cannot. He's got a howitzer coming out of his neck, but he's very inaccurate. He makes pretty terrible reads. Let's see. Rattler also was hyped for Heisman last year. Yeah, and some of this, look, y'all, like some of this is just preseason discussion I'm okay with. I'm okay with, like, Rattler had a good freshman year. Kevin said we're great at pissing off every single fan base. It's true. Everybody hates us and nobody knows who our team is. South Florida just missed the field goal after fumbling a snap, pushing it back a little bit further. They probably would have hit it if it was closer. That's tough. But yeah, I think that was a very premature preseason Heisman pick. Like when you've got known quantities like Will Anderson, Bryce Young won it last year, Stroud was in New York last year. These guys all came back, right? Putting that kind of hype on a guy who I think he had like 30 career pass attempts coming into the season did not make sense to me. Nikki G said F's in the chat for Robert Patrick Petrino for his Super Bowl loss today. I'm not selling Arkansas yet. I still think they're a top 10 to 15 team. Thanks for the content and go Dogs. I think Arkansas is a good team with probably a not great defense. We've seen this now. I mean, you're a Georgia fan. You saw what South Carolina did offensively today. I think they put up 30 points last week, and Rattler hit him up for like 370. I'm going off my memory. I think it was like 362, and he had like 9.6 yards per attempt. Y'all can check me in the comments. 9.6 from Rattler, whose offense is really kind of a sandlot kind of thing, ain't great. 30 points ain't great. And it wasn't just 30 points against the scrubs. It was It was not great. But I do think that Arkansas is a decent team. I don't think they're I don't know. I'm not ready to say they're a top 10 team anymore after what I saw today. Takes on what's our take on Southern Cal? I think they have the potential to have a great offense, and until I see a Lincoln Riley team with a great defense, I assume they suck. But I think that they've stolen enough talent from the rest of college football, coaching and on the field personnel alike, that they're going to have a good team this year. I'm kind of disgusted on how, like, I had a whole thing about how he left. But yeah, I think that USC is going to be pretty good this year. I think that they're potentially a lot better team than Utah or Oregon. Let's see. Let me catch up. Mike giving us play by play, letting us know that it's snap. I'm way behind on Super Chat. Casey Knox says Daniel is definitely a Georgia fan. There's arguments about who my team is. This is what's great about. I think it speaks to our objectivity. We've been doing this for, I think, 6 or 7 years now. And nobody knows who our team is. There's a couple of people that know. Josh Payton knows. RJ Young knows. But we get accused of being, I think this week we've gotten Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, some people that don't know our roots, being in the SEC territory. Somebody accused us earlier in the year of being Ohio State fans. So that to me speaks to our objectivity. I'm pretty proud of that. I'm proud that we've kind of kept it quiet for this long. Everyone in Alabama goes for the Braves. I guess this is y'all trying to figure it out. Everyone in the Southeast goes for the Braves. If you go to a Braves game, you'll notice that there's more people there from South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi than there are from people that live in Atlanta. It's a true story. Josh Pate told me you're a fan of Pate State. Sometimes, the Braves hat gives nothing away. And I'm pretty upfront about being a huge Braves fan. I know this is absolutely silly. I'll share it with y'all. I actually teared up when we won the World Series last year. Casey Knox, thank you for the super chat. You'll never know if I'm a Georgia fan, a Bama fan, a Penn State fan. But yes, I'm absolutely a college football fan. I think some people have picked me as a Georgia fan because I picked Georgia to beat Alabama last year and Josh did not. But I don't think that says much. People say I'm not a Texas A&M fan. This is another thing we got accused of being fans of for a really long time. And now we've had some comments about their NIL approach and about Jimbo Fisher, and people think we just hate them. But that's not true. We don't hate them. Let's see. Brian Glaze says, except people like me that don't watch baseball. You should watch baseball. It's awesome. It's wonderful. All right. So y'all come at me with some questions. Josh Hunt says we're 100% Bama fans. One person says we're a UAB fan. All right. That's enough of that. But it is interesting to see we've been accused of Bama in Georgia. Louisiana Tech did score again, but Clemson's finally rounded out a little bit of an offense here with 34 points. Michigan State has, after they got down, I think 19, they've kept it within 19. But y'all let me know in the comments. I don't love Peyton Thorne, and I think he's going to hold them back in a way that Iowa is held back by a pretty mediocre quarterback, in the way that I think that Aiden O'Connell is a little bit overrated. This is something that we've said for a while that's a little bit frustrating as college football fans. Is it used to be that Big Ten was a great quarterback league, and now that's kind of moved to the SEC in the last few years. There's no quarterbacks good enough to challenge Ohio State. And it's been like that for years. Like, you think about like the Northwestern game or the Wisconsin game, I think twice against Wisconsin a couple of years ago, where they got down and they were making mistake after mistake after mistake. But the team they were playing, either Northwestern or Wisconsin or whomever, couldn't capitalize because they didn't have the offense. They didn't have a quarterback. And name me a great quarterback in the Big Ten right now, besides CJ Stroud. Name me one. There isn't. And it's been that way for a while. And it's frustrating because I want to see, I want to see teams like I love watching teams like Alabama and Georgia go up against elite offenses or quarterbacks, and we just haven't seen that for a while in the Big Ten. And Michigan bullied their way through to a championship last year, but we saw what happened when they played Georgia. That's not something that's going to win at a super high level. JJ McCarthy couldn't beat Cade McNamara out for the starting job. I think he has the potential to be. To me, he reminds me a lot of Stetson Bennett. But I think Stetson Bennett plays in a much better system. So Tanner Morgan, come on. Tanner Morgan is going to be lucky to hold a clipboard for a couple of years. True on the Big Ten quarterbacks is Talia, really the next best. He might be, and he's not great. Talia, I don't think will make an NFL roster. I think he's decent. I don't think he's great. Harbaugh is not a QB whisperer. He's just not. Same can be said for Alabama. Alabama QBs over the last couple of years have been head and shoulders above everyone else in the conference. I disagree. Joe Burrow, decent quarterback. Stetson Bennett, decent quarterback. Kyle Trask, decent quarterback. I mean, these are guys that are on or will be on NFL rosters or have played in the Super Bowl. So I don't know that I agree with that. Tully is not awful. Come on, y'all. He's okay. Harrison says he's excited to see the model this year. I'm excited too because I don't know what we're going to get with it, given how much parity we've got. I've got to catch up here, y'all. I've been talking so much that I haven't been taking advantage of my 1920. Y'all let me know in the super chat. Tonight I'm drinking Old Forester 1920. My daily driver is usually Wild Turkey Rare Breed or Russell's 10-year. Y'all let me know in the super chat what your daily driver is, and then what your big, super important game brown party liquor is. Let's see. Dawson came through with another super chat. Honest opinions on Oklahoma teams. Top 7-6 to me. Let's not forget Oklahoma State gave up 44 to Central Michigan. Let's see what Central Michigan did today. Somebody help me out here. Sparty coming back. They scored 12 points in the fourth quarter. But yeah, so I don't love that. That gives me. I'm a big Spencer Sanders fan. I said that in I think our first top 10. But let's see real quick. Hate doing this. They scored 41 on Bucknell today. So I don't know. I think Oklahoma State's decent. I think they've benefited a little bit from a down Big 12. I think Oklahoma is legit. Bama fan says he drinks White Lightning. Tim says Crown Royal, peach, or vanilla. Mike Farino coming back with another super chat. I think JJ beat out Cade in camp, but Harbaugh didn't want to take the ball away from his senior captain, who saved the job by giving it a chance to keep it. I think there's something to that. I think that's a fair possibility. Some coaches do give a lot of credit to the incumbent guy, especially if they won a lot of games. I think we're seeing a little bit of this with Sean Clifford. Larry or Steven in the chat might completely disagree with me. I said last week, Penn State has a hard ceiling of maybe 9 or 10 games this year with Clifford. Allard, they could win a lot of games. I think he's already a better quarterback and can do things that Clifford just can't. And I'm excited to see where he goes in the future. But I hate that we've got Clifford getting a career achievement award of being the starter this year, if he's not the best quarterback on the team. Zach, we know you were joking about Harbaugh being a quarterback whisperer. Harrison asked what I'm drinking tonight. I said earlier, we're going back to Old Forester 1920. I think it's a pretty good, easy sip in spite of being 115 proof. They do a good job. Russell's 10, Jack said Russell's 10. I cannot get Russell's single barrel anywhere around me. I would love to have that as a daily driver. Let's see. Somebody said, when it comes to wild turkey, respect the dirty bird or fear the kicking chicken. I do hate for our podcast listeners, this one's just going to be a little uneven because I am having to pull double duty and read through the chat while I think of things to say. Casey Knox says Busch Light, Crown Royal, or Jameson. Casey, let me know as a follow-up. You don't have to do super chat. Which one you do for games that make you nervous. Because that's something, as a sidebar, as a fan, games that make me nervous, I'm probably more brown party liquor. Games that I'm not nervous at all about, is generally I'll go with beer. Steven says Aller should be playing this year. We're not winning the Big Ten this year. Just give him the ball and we'll be better next year. I think that, based on the comment that I had earlier, I think that having a dynamic quarterback, and if I'm not mistaken, Penn State gets Ohio State at home this year. I think having a dynamic quarterback could balance the scales a little bit when there is a talent gap. And you're going to give up some points. CJ Stroud's going to put up points on you. So you need to be able to respond in kind. And honestly, I would do it. I would do it right now. Take your lumps if you have to. Like you said, if you don't have any expectation of winning the Big Ten this year, take your lumps for next year. But Sean Clifford's a 19-year starter, so nobody's going to bench him. Elite Falcon says, could Penn State be a top 10 team next year? I think they might end up, because of Parity and because of some other stuff. They might maybe end up being one this year. I don't think that a top 10 best team in the country this year, but because of schedule, that might happen. Let's see. If anyone says Southern Comfort, your opinion is invalid. I don't know, man. SoCo advertises a lot at least in the SEC footprint on game day. What does Bama do if Bryce Young gets hurt? This is a good question, Dawson, because Milroe, as a runner, he's kind of like Anthony Richardson. As a runner, he looks amazing from what I've seen, but as a passer, he ain't there. So I think their third string quarterback's like Ty Simpson. I'm trying to think from recruiting stuff. I don't know what they'd do. I think Alabama would be in trouble if Bryce Young got hurt. I think they'd be in real trouble. Mike Farino says he's having Jack Daniel's single barrel, which is also one of my favorite go-tos. 1920 in a late kick cup. No, this is my water cup. I don't think I'd be drinking brown party liquor out of a 32-ounce cup. That'd be something. So it looks like A&M just scored and Max Johnson had a couple of good throws. It's amazing to me that Haynes King, and this is another one where I think there's pressure to start the 5-star, start the guy that's got a lot of the hype. It's amazing to me that Haynes King was the starter out of camp based on what I'm seeing tonight. I'm seeing a much more comfortable quarterback, a more decisive quarterback that doesn't have a 9-minute wind up to throw the ball. It's getting the ball to H8 in space and just letting him work. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that Haynes King was the starter coming out of camp. And then when we saw, like, if you really watch this, the who do they play in the first? Sam Houston. If you watch that game, they scored 31 eventually, but he looked terrible. And it was beyond just the points. It was the reads. It was the fact that he had a couple of bombs, but everything else was just like running the normal offense looked really bad. All right. Let's see. I think Clemson is holding DJU back, to be honest. I think Clemson needs to hold him back to the bench, if I'm being honest. Iowa has 17 points. That's wild because Iowa, man, worst offense I've ever seen. This year has just been absolutely a disaster, and I think that Ferentz should take some heat for letting his kid run the offense because it's an abject disaster. It's terrible. Let's catch up on the chat a little bit. Casey says he drinks Jameson when he's nervous. Penn State always finds a specimen on defense. Carter's a man amongst boys. Yeah, Penn State does do that. Lately, it's been at linebacker, but they've always got somebody. The pretty decent secondary players too this year, and that's something that we noticed. That's something we noticed in watching the Auburn game. We pointed out, like, Auburn's wide receivers are not good, and Penn State's got a pretty good secondary. Terrible mismatch in that regard. They were never open, and that's credit to Penn State. They were, Stephen, you can fall on the floor there. I just gave some credit to Penn State. Can anyone beat Georgia this year? Look, I thought that Georgia was unbeatable going into the SEC championship game last year. So yes, someone can beat Georgia. Georgia has a little bit of the Michigan thing this year in that their schedule is light and they don't play nobody, and it's not their fault, and they're going to dominate the schedule. So we're not going to see anything that should tell us, like, hey, they're bad, because that's the other thing. Like, I don't care if your schedule's bad. If you dominate it, then you're good. Like 2018 Clemson, who do they play? Did they play anybody that was good? No, but that doesn't mean you're bad. If you play bad teams, that does not mean you're bad or you are not good. And Georgia is definitely good. Alabama scored 40 points per game last year with Bob. Okay. Maybe that was in spite of Bob, though, because based on what I've seen this year, y'all, if y'all go back and watch the Texas game, there's a video for you to easily watch it for those of y'all who like to do like film review on Sunday. I know there's some of y'all nerds out there like us. You can watch every offensive play from Alabama against Texas. Texas was running a pretty straightforward cover 3 most of the game. Alabama was running man-beater routes for 3 quarters. They were running man-beater crossers for 3 quarters. It wasn't until that 4th quarter where they started sitting in zones, like really sitting in zones and running people out on sticks, and they were spreading out and not crossing, so they weren't coming into each other's wash. That is insane to me that it took them 3 quarters, really 3.5 quarters, to adjust their route trees to where they weren't running man beaters against the zone defense. It was, if there's a couple of plays out there, it was so easy for Texas to cover those wide receivers. They couldn't get open because one linebacker could drop and cover 2-3 guys that were all coming through the middle. And if you're running these man beater crossers, then you're not looking for the ball until you're clear of your cross. So it's insane to me. So yes, they might have scored a lot of points with Bob last year. I think it was in spite of him, because that's some stubborn, I'm not going to get us demonetized, some stubborn stuff right there, to run that for 3 quarters against his own defense. So anyway, I'm not a Bob fan, but he isn't as stubborn as Jimbo Fisher. This is true. Jimbo Fisher is way worse. And yes, they've got 17 points tonight. But that offense is very pro style-ish, and it also requires the quarterback to make really tight, low percentage throws. They did this for 3 years with Kellen Mond, where you have a guy that's super good in the run game. Don't let him run. You got him back there making multi-progression reads or progression reads and this very complex offense. And that's why some days it would click and some days he'd be out of his mind and they'd put up 30 points against Alabama in a loss. And then some days they couldn't score against crappy teams. That's just this offense. And that's a lot of why, if we're being entirely honest, sorry for my A&M friends, you can't be consistent with that offense enough to not lose 3 games a year. Take that for what you will. Jimbo's a problem. He thinks it's 2014. Somebody saw Josh Pate's milk jug. His approach to the game is very stubborn. It's very pro style. And somebody asked him in the post-game press conference, or maybe it was a midweek press conference, if he'd ever considered changing who calls the plays. And I had a kind of a sideline text going with Josh Pate, and I asked him if he saw it, and he said, yeah. I wish somebody would ask him if he would, because they even said ego, if he would get his ego out of the way and let's implement a different scheme. And that is the real question. It's not even the play calling. It's the overall scheme that needs to go in the trash can. One thing that I want to touch on a little bit, because this is the one team that, I think USC might be able to, or not USC, Ohio State might be one of those teams that can potentially beat Georgia. Obviously, the other one is Alabama. And one of the things I've noticed all year from Bryce Young is, other than a couple of drives, he's playing like a merely good quarterback this year. Not a great one. He's really off on the deep ball. I think some of the checks at the line, pre-read, pre-snap read stuff is on him. He's not as sharp as he was last year. That second interception he threw today was a catchable ball, but it wasn't great. So if I'm being honest, and I know this gets me in trouble with a lot of Alabama fans, I think that he, at least so far, is a good, not elite quarterback. At least how he's playing this year. Y'all can get at me in the comments and tell me I'm crazy, but tape don't lie. All right, I've got about 10 more minutes, y'all. This one is a challenge, as I've already said. But I think that I can go for about 10 minutes if y'all can come at me with some really good questions. Horatio says Kirby Smart's the best recruiter on the planet and the best defensive mind. I think this is pretty clear. Like, Kirby's not hurting with Dan Lanning leaving to Oregon. Like, he's not. So a lot of that is his system. And yeah, he's got absolute elite talent at this point. He has built the thing that Nick Saban has had, and the thing he was part of with Nick Saban at Alabama. He is a tremendous recruiter as well. I don't know that he's a better recruiter than Nick Saban. I could see him being on par with Nick Saban. I do think that Nick Saban's age might start to come into play soon. I will be interested to see if Nick Saban, because I think either way O'Brien's gone this year. I'll be interested to see if he makes a good hire at offensive coordinator, because I think that if Alabama's going to get maybe one more national championship out of Nick Saban, it's probably not this year, if I'm being entirely honest, but it's going to have to be with making the absolute perfect offensive coordinator hire. And he hasn't been great there. Like, I think Steve Sarkisian is the best offensive mind in the game, but I think Saban made a little bit of a friend hire with the guy that's slipping my mind right now, the head coach at Maryland. And I don't love the O'Brien hire and sticking with him. And the fact that he didn't let O'Brien go after last year, I think is a little bit shows that he's maybe softening up a little bit. We've gone from the guy that fired somebody in the middle of the playoffs as a coordinator in the middle of the playoffs to sticking with somebody who didn't get it done last year. Kentucky versus Ole Miss in 2 weeks. Early thoughts. I think that Ole Miss, I think that Ole Miss was better at quarterback last year than they are this year, and it's kind of jamming up a little bit what Lane Kiffin can do offensively. But it seems like, especially today, they put up some points. They're getting a little more comfortable. My concern is what do they do against a really physical team? But I also wonder, like Kentucky, I don't love their offense this year. I think Will Levis he's going to measure well at the combine, but I don't think he's a great quarterback. I think he's got a lot to work on. So I don't know. If I had to pick that game today, I would probably pick Ole Miss. I don't think Kentucky's that great. Honestly, I don't think they're that great. So someone said Brian Hartline is the best recruiter. He's had a good run of wide receivers. He's a good wide receiver coach and recruiter. But he's also a position coach. So he works one region, one group. So I think if we're talking head coaches, it's Nick Saban or Kirby Smart. Is Bryce Young next? Jalen Hurts had early success at Bama, not looking great this season. Bryce Young, as a merely good quarterback, looks better than Jalen Hurts ever did at Alabama, in my opinion. I never liked Jalen Hurts at Alabama. I thought that you talk about a one-read guy that couldn't read the defense and had crazy meltdowns. Like Bryce Young does get the yips. He does go into a shell. He does it. It's true. But Alabama fans, if I'm assuming maybe not, but I'm assuming you might be an Alabama fan to ask a question. If you remember 2017 Auburn, the guy couldn't even get he didn't even know what the play clock was saying. And he let on one drive, I think he had multiple delay games because he was just so everybody talked about how cool he was, but he was cool in his eyes and making terrible plays. I think that I never was super high on him. Maybe that's blasphemy with Alabama fans too. Stephen Light says, does Clemson need to find a home in the SEC to survive? I think the ACC is probably going to be the one other conference that is okay. They've got some brand names there, and they've got what the Pac-12 doesn't have is really engaged fan bases. But you look at a lot of the teams in the ACC right now, even when they're down, they got people coming to the ball games. They got people coming to filling up the stadiums. So I think that the ACC can probably survive, especially if they can figure something out with Notre Dame. They've been flirting with Notre Dame for years. But I do want to remind everyone, because people get this messed up, Notre Dame playing ACC teams is not a conference game. Somebody argued with us about this on Twitter. It's not a conference game. They're not in the ACC. Just because Notre Dame lacrosse or soccer is in the ACC does not mean that Notre Dame football is in the ACC. Notre Dame is independent. They have a deal to play a handful of ACC teams every year. That does not mean they're in the ACC. That is an out-of-conference game for every ACC team. So I just had to get that out there because there seems to be some real confusion. Thank you, Jack, for agreeing with me on Will Levis. He is overrated, in my opinion. Nick Saban hires Urban Meyer as offensive coordinator would be a disaster hire. Urban Meyer, I don't think, has been an offensive play caller in a decade. And I think that Urban Meyer, I thought Urban Meyer was going to bust in the NFL. I think Ryan Day is a better coach, if I'm being honest. I think that Alabama could get somebody. I think Saban could even get a Levy. But he needs someone again who's super dynamic and Bob ain't it. He just ain't it. Pac-12 home with empty stadiums. Yeah, and that's why I think Pac-12 is in trouble. Like, USC fans are going to show up because there's, well, I actually don't think they showed up a lot. I think I saw some pictures of either spring game or the first game. There wasn't a lot of people there. If USC wins 11 games, wins the Pac-12, they'll do okay, but they're not going to do great. And other schools like UCLA has an entirely disinterested fan base, just entirely. There's a lot of admins on the West Coast that just don't invest in and care about football in a way that SEC and Big Ten schools do and ACC schools do. They just don't. USC is going to kill Fresno. We're probably going to overreact to that. Fresno State's not very good. Certified says that he can't agree that Ryan Day is a better coach than Urban Meyer. I mean, it's not a super bonkers take, in my opinion. Like, I think that, Urban Meyer won the one championship at Ohio State in 2014, and then he won a bunch of other games. Ryan Day has to operate in a world with a good Michigan now. Urban Meyer didn't have that, really. Ryan Day has to operate in a world where Georgia is elite and Alabama is elite. And that 2014 Alabama team wasn't great. I'm not taking anything away from Urban Meyer, but if I were picking a coach today to coach my team to be a head coach, like I said this when Texas hired Steve Sarkisian, because a lot of people were saying they need to get Urban Meyer. I said I would take Sarkisian in a minute over Urban Meyer. Also feel like he's probably he's not putting the same energy into a team now that he was 10, 15 years ago. Yeah, Levy I think he'd be awesome in Tuscaloosa. Mac had peak Sark, so Bryce never had Sark and won the Heisman. Mac Jones is a better quarterback than Bryce Young. Full stop. He didn't win the Heisman. In some ways, like Stetson Bennett won't win the Heisman. Like he didn't have the flash and it looked the part, but yeah, and he did have tremendous surrounding talent. I think that hurt Tua a little bit. I think that hurt Mac Jones a little bit. Two quarterbacks that I think are great quarterbacks outside of the talent they had. But when you've got, 3-4 first-round wide receivers at your disposal, when you've got a first-round wide receiver who can't start in college on your roster, you've got a little bit of a unique situation, and that hurt a little bit. 2014 was not Alabama's worst team in this run. I think that 2013 was actually worse. I think Miami's definitely going to lose to A&M, but I also think for A&M fans, what's really encouraging here is they found something at quarterback, because Miami's not a bad defense. Remember, Haynes King threw for 97 yards against an Appalachian State defense that gave up 63 in regulation to Drake May and the North Carolina Tar Heels. By the way, I would not be surprised, and I'm going to save this, because Alabama's going to have a quarterback problem next year. They're not winning a national championship with Milroe or whoever else is on that roster. I could see May, who originally committed to Alabama, transferring from North Carolina, which is going to make people crazy when that happens. When something like whoever Alabama gets in the transfer portal at quarterback this year is going to really piss people off, because it's going to prove that Alabama is never going to have a year where they have gaps. They should have had gaps at running back this year. Maybe not. McClellan looks really good. Should have had gaps at wide receiver. And I think with Harrell coming in, if he gets healthy, they won't have the gaps that they would have had. If Alabama goes out and gets a quarterback from somebody else and makes that team worse and makes them a national championship team or caliber team in a year where they otherwise wouldn't have been, people are going to lose it. And maybe that'll help us realize that free transfer is a bad idea. All right, I got time for maybe one or two more questions, and then I've got to go. Would I take 2014 over AJ McCarron's final season? Yes, because I think Nussmeier was still the OC in 2013, and that Alabama team just wasn't. They weren't great. That they lost to Auburn the kick six, but in general, they just weren't a great team. Go back and look. I would take Lane Kiffin and Blake Sims at quarterback over AJ McCarron's last year with Nussmeier at OC, who I think was an absolute disaster OC. I think it was terrible. Also, just really bad. All right. One more question. So I said JT was short. I love that. This is another thing. Like, this is why we don't love the idea of playoff expansion, because things like kick six and JT was short are part of lore because those games mattered in a way that they're not going to matter when you can lose 2 or 3 games and still make the playoffs. They're just not. Nobody cares about NFL regular season. There's not a lot of like crazy memes or memorable moments from any NFL regular season games. I mean, they're just not. So let me get one more question, and then I'm going to go to bed. Let's see. One more. One more. Bruce Rivers, and this is a good question, a good point to end on. Bruce Rivers said that he needs Ohio State to get in, play the NIL game. This is something that that we've said for a while, or at least since we saw what A&M was doing. Ohio State, I think, is doing the NIL thing the right way in a lot of ways, and I don't know that any team should be doing it the right way after we saw what A&M was able to do and what USC was able to do. Like, if the NCAA isn't going to enforce it and NIL is really just pay for play, then Ohio State and Alabama and all these other teams, these big teams, and every Texas team, honestly, these teams should do the same thing A&M did and start buying classes. And I think we're going to see that. I think Ohio State and some of these other teams, like, you don't have much to lose if you're A&M and you're 8-4 city, and you've got the money and the fan base that's hungry for a title that you can run out. You can go out and buy one. And what do you like? The NCAA has shown that they're not willing to pursue much, but if they do punish you, it's a little unprecedented. So they're not going to throw the book at you. Like, unprecedented in that NIL is such a new thing. But the risk was worth the reward. The risk isn't worth the reward for Ohio State or Alabama up until this point. Because if Ohio State loses 5 scholarships or whatever, gets a bowl ban because they do NIL the way that other teams are doing it in a pay-for-play sort of way, they're winning. They're potentially have championship teams now. So the risk isn't worth it. It was worth it for A&M. But yes, you're right, Bruce. I think that you will see Ohio State get involved in that. And we'll see Alabama getting involved in that in a way that they're already doing NIL deals. So just to be clear, but to use it as a vessel to buy players, to incite them to come play for you through actual recruiting, when some of these schools start doing it, it's going to completely eradicate any concept of parity in college football. All right, y'all. I have got to go to sleep and kill this one because an hour and a half with no producer, nobody helping me much, and having to talk myself is a lot. Thanks, y'all, for showing up, because this was tough for me, as a challenge for me. So I really appreciate y'all showing up. Great questions, great discussion. Even Horatio kept it pretty calm this week in the chat. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a wonderful week.